Okay, guys, I just found this article on climate. Scientists urge deep, rapid change to limit warming. It says it's the final call, says scientists, most extensive warning yet on risks of rising global temperatures. Their dramatic report on keeping that rise under 1.5 Celsius states that the world is now completely off track, heading instead toward 3 Celsius. Staying below 1.5 Celsius will require rapid, far-reaching, and unprecedented changes in all aspects of society. It will be hugely expensive, the report says, but the window of opportunity is not yet closed. After 3 years of research and a week of haggling between scientists and government officials at a meeting in South Korea, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change has issued a special report on the impact of global warming of 1.5 Celsius. Fast fashion is harming the planet. Vietnam's children are in fear of climate change. What could be wiped out by temperature rising are the questions. The three critical 33-page summary of policymakers certainly bears the hallmarks of different and difficult negotiations between climate researchers and determined to stick with their study that show political representational people being more concerned with the economy and living standards. Coral reefs face extinction. Despite the inevitability compromises, there are some key issues that come through loud and clear. The first is that limiting warming to 1.5 Celsius brings a lot of benefits compared with limiting it to 2 degrees. It really reduces the impact of climate change in very important ways. The second is the unprecedented nature of the change that are required if we are to limit warming to 1.5 Celsius, changes to energy systems, changes to the way we manage land, changes to the way we move around with transportation. What's the big takeaway? Scientists might want to write in capital letters, "Act now, idiots," but they need to say that with facts and numbers, said Greenpeace, who was an observer at negotiations. The researchers have used these facts and numbers to paint a picture of the world with dangerous fever caused by humans. We used to think it would keep warming below 2 degrees this century. Then the changes would be more manageable. Not anymore. This new study says that going past 1.5 Celsius is dicing with the planet's livability, and the 1.5 Celsius temperature guardrail could be exceeded in just 12 years in 2030. We can stay below it, but it will require urgent large-scale changes from government and individuals, plus we will have to invest a massive pile of cash every year, around 2.5% of global GDP for 2 decades. Even then, we will still need machines, trees, and plants to capture carbon from the air that we can then store deep underground forever. Okay. Five steps. Global emissions of CO2 need to decline by 45% from 2010 levels by 2030. Renewables are estimated to provide up to 85% of global electricity by 2050. Coal is expected to reduce to close to zero. Up to 7 million square kilometers of land will be needed for energy crops, a bit less than the size of Australia. Global net zero emissions by 2050. How much will this cost? It won't come cheap. The reporter says that to limit warming to 1.5 Celsius, it involve annual average investments needed in energy systems of around 2.4 trillion between 2016 and 2035. Experts believe that this number needs to be put in context. There are costs and benefits you have to weigh up. And former UK IPCC negotiator, now with the WWF, who says that cutting emissions hard in the short term will cost money, but it is cheaper than paying for carbon dioxide removal later this century. The report also talks about the benefits, as there is higher economic growth at 1.5 degrees than there is at 2 degrees Celsius, and you don't have the higher impact of catastrophes than that you would in the 2% range. What happens if we don't act? The researchers say that if we fail to keep temperatures below 1.5 Celsius, we are in for some significant dangerous changes to our world. You can kiss coral reefs goodbye, as the report says. They would essentially 100% wipe out in 2 degrees of warming. Global sea level will rise around 10 centimeters more if we let warming go to 2 Celsius. That may not sound like much, but keeping 1.5 Celsius means that 10 million fewer people would be exposed to the risks of flooding. There is also significant impacts on ocean temperature and acidity and the ability to grow crops like rice, maize, and wheat. We already have the danger zone at 1 degree of warming. Both poles are melting at an accelerated rate. Ancient trees that have been there for hundreds of years are suddenly dying. And this summer we've just experienced, basically the whole world is on fire. Okay, and being that it's October and here it is still 82 degrees. So that just tells you you can see it around you. It's not something you need to read about. Is this plan at all feasible? That all depends on what you mean. The IPCC scientists are not allowed to prescribe what should be done. They can only outline what the options are. But those involved with study believe it shows realistic paths to staying under 1.5 Celsius. It is feasible if we are put our best foot forward, and that's a key message of this report. No one can opt out anymore, said Dr. Deborah Roberts, who's co-chair of IPCC. We all have to fundamentally change that way we live our lives. We can't remain remote from problem anymore. The report is very clear this can be done, but it will require massive changes socially, politically, and accompanied by technological development. Is there about saving small island states? The idea of keeping the global warming temperature rise to 1.5 is something very close to the hearts and minds of small island and low-lying states who feel they will be done in with flooding if temperatures go to 2 degrees. But over the 3 years that the report was in preparation, more and more scientific evidence has been published showing that the benefits of staying close to 1.5 are not just for island nations in the Pacific. If you save small island countries, then you can save the world. Because the report clearly states that no one is going to be immune. It's about morality. It's not about morality. It's about humanity. How long do we have? Not long at all, but the issue is now in the hands of political leaders. The report says that the hard decisions can no longer be kicked down the road. If the nations of the world don't act soon, they will have to rely even more on unproven technologies that take carbon out of the air, an expensive and uncertain road. They really need to start working immediately. The report is clear that the governments just fulfill the pledges they made in the Paris Agreement in 2030. It is not good enough. It will make it very difficult to consider global warming of 1.5 Celsius. If they read the report and decide to increase their ambitions and act more immediately, then 1.5 Celsius stays within reach. That's nature of choice they face. Campaigners and environmentalists who have welcomed the report say there is simply no time left to debate. This is the moment where we need to decide. We have to move to clean energy, sustain lifestyles. We want to protect our forests and species. Protect our forests and species. This is the most important, that we will remember that the year when the turning point happens. What can I do? The report says that there must be rapid, significant changes in 4 big global systems: energy, land use, cities, and industries. This is not about remote science. It's about where we live, work, and it gives us a clue on how we might be able to contribute to that massive change. You might say you don't have control over land use, but you do have control over what you eat, and that determines land use. We can choose the way we move in cities, and if we don't have access to public transport, make sure you are electing politicians that provide options around public transportation. Now, what they mean about how we control our land is determined by what we eat, meaning the amount of land that's being used for factory farming would amaze you if you were to look up the amount of land that is used for factory farming. The conditions in which these animals are being kept is horrific. If we would say no to meat and say yes to life, that land could be freed up for these issues and help us use that land effectively for this global warming issue. And I remember hearing about this while I was still in very early grades of elementary school. And I'm 39 now, so you gotta, I'm thinking like 30, excuse me, I'm thinking probably about, from the time I was about 7 or 8, I was starting to hear about global warming. So this isn't a new issue. This is an issue that's been around for quite some time. And it's just like, I think people kept on pushing this, like, yeah, we got time, and you know what I'm saying? We could do it later. We don't have to do it right now. That type of thing. So it's just ridiculous. Here's another part I wanted to bring in. It's saying that fast fashion is harming the planet. Okay? Young people's love of fashion is coming under the scrutiny of Britain's lawmakers. MPs say the fashion industry is a major source of greenhouse gases that are overheating the planet. Disregarded clothes are also piling up in landfill sites. Fiber debris fragments are flowing into the sea when clothes are washed. The retailers admit needs to be done, but they say they are already working to reduce the impact of their products. Question they're asking: would you rent rather than buy your clothes? Not a bad idea, because people get bored with stuff like I do. It says that impacts of fast fashion: 2.7 kilograms of UK consumption of new clothing per head is the highest in Europe. 235 million items of clothing sent to landfills last year. Okay, instead of donating these clothes, people are throwing them away. 700,000 fibers released in a single domestic wash. 1.2 billion tons of carbon emissions produced by global fashion industry, 3,781 liters of water used to fill lifetime of pair of Levi's 501 jeans. The House of Commons Environmental Audit Committee says that this is a basic problem with an industry that relies on persuading people to throw away good clothes because they are last year's colors. The quotes evidence that British shoppers buy far more new clothes than any other nation in Europe. People are buying twice as many items of clothing as they did a decade ago. Fish in the sea are eating synthetic fibers dislodged in the wash. The MPs have written to the UK's top fashion bosses asking how they can maintain a Euro 28 billion benefit their industry, bringing the UK economy while reducing the environmental harm. They believe swift action is essential because as current clothes consumption continues, they will account for more than a quarter of our total impact on climate change by 2050. There are 5 garments, and 3 in 5 garments land in a landfill incinerators within a year. That's expensive fuel. 500,000 tons of microfibers a year enter the ocean doing nothing. It is not an option. What are some of the solutions? The committee report to the government conclude a call for fashion industry to create less pollution and demand for longer life garments and ban out dumping clothes in landfills. The MPs also have concerns about social impacts. They believe fast fashion is fueling quick turnaround among suppliers, which may lead to poor working conditions. Among their questions to retailers are, do you pay the living wage, and how do you ensure child labor is not used in factories? Do you use recycled materials? How long do you keep your clothes, and how do you encourage recycling? Do you incinerate unsold or returned stock? How are you reducing the flow of microfibers into the sea? What do retailers say in response? Peter Andrews, head of sustainability at the British Retail Consortium, told BBC News that the population growth and increased demand have led to an increase in the overall volume and environmental impact of clothing. But he says his members are now designing products that are made to last, and they encourage customers to return unwanted clothes for reuse. We know more needs to be done, but the best answer will be achieved with collaborated global actions. The companies approached by the MPs are MS, Primark, Next, Acadia, Asda, TK, Max, and HomeSense, Tesco, JD Sports Fashion, Debenhams, Sports Direct International. Now, this is just a report from the UK, but this is going on here too. Like, you know what I mean? So, that's just a little information about what fashion does. You would never think fashion would contribute to environmental issues, but I guess you learn something new every day. Let me see, where was that other thing I wanted to read you guys? Okay, here it says climate change, what could be wiped out by temperature rising? Okay, first of all, the polar bears and most of the Arctic animals are dying at a rapid pace due to the ice melting and there not being enough food sources for them. Here it says, scientists have described the serious concept of hot house Earth. An international team of researchers suggested that global warming will have severe consequences for the planet, which we've been knowing that They paint a picture of boiling hot climates and towering seas in years to come if temperatures rise to just 2 Celsius more. This means it could turn some of the planet's natural forces that currently protect us into our enemies. That means it could turn some of the... Alright, I read that right. Dr. Sarah Carnell is an environmental scientist and one of the researchers behind the report for the Stockholm Resilience Center. She describes some of the big changes which can happen with the 2 Celsius temperature rise, which is globally accepted amount according to the Paris Climate Agreement. Here it says cocoa pods, from which we got cacao beans for making chocolate grown countries around the equator, which is a hotter climates. This is something that is very close to Dr. Cornell's and everybody's heart. Chocolate is just one example of globally important crop that grows in warm and humid climates. Both global warming doesn't mean that there will be more places to grow cocoa beans. In fact, it's the opposite. A rise of global temperatures causes weather systems to be unpredictable and inconsistent, which would put cacao growing at risk. It's about really the pattern of temperature, water flow, light intensity, and nutrients that are available in soil. Okay? Now, just as I've said, the Arctic areas could melt. Ice in the areas around the North Pole could melt completely. But it's not just animals living there which are under threat. When you melt the Arctic, you're changing the way the whole Earth works, she said. You're changing ice that reflects heat back into space, into dark seawater that absorbs incoming solar radiation. It is a cycle that less ice there is to reflect heat away from the Earth, the more global warming accelerates. Entire nations might have to move. The village of Kiribati in the Pacific Ocean had to relocate because of rising sea levels. How can you be a country if you don't have any islands? If you don't have any land. Melting ice means rising sea levels, which could put low-lying island nations such as the Maldives under the sea. It will have all kinds of social consequences because the people who live in these low-lying areas will have to go somewhere. There are already lots of discussion with people living in low Pacific Islands talking with Australia and New Zealand about where they can live and how they can have a nationhood while renting land from another country. Unpredictable rain. Recent floods in Japan left hundreds of people dead and millions had to evacuate their homes. We've also seen a substantial amount of rain here in the U.S. Combine rising temperatures with other human activities such as deforestation, and you have drastic effects on the water cycle. When you change landscapes, you change where water can flow. When you warm the planet and are simultaneously changing the landscape, you're changing the water cycle in a much less predictable way than it was before. Extreme changes to water cycles can lead to severe floods and even severe droughts. Tree frogs affect the whole ecosystem. The Tuffy, the frog, was originated from a forest in Panama. 2 years ago, a little brown tree frog called Tuggy died in Atlanta, USA at the age of 12. He was the last known living Rab's fringe lean tree frog to exist. Tuffy's story is a symbol of the rate of extinction that is being caused by the result of climate change. The extinction of species, even as small as a frog, has consequences which we don't yet fully understand. We could lose tree frogs, and that doesn't sound important, but vitally important because it's what we lose with it. When we're killing species, we probably won't know in advance what the consequences are, but we already know that we're making ecosystems much more vulnerable. Okay. And that's some sad shit. Alright, let's see what else is in this that I can read to you guys that has to do with all of this. I'd rather get it all in one video and then, you know, go from there. Where the hell is the links that I just seen? These links keep disappearing and reappearing. Okay. Let's look at this. Let's look at this link. The renting clothes thing actually sounds pretty cool. I'm going to tell you why. Because people like me, who get bored very quickly with stuff, I mean, that would be awesome to, like, you know, rent something and then when you're done with it, rent something else and just recycle the clothes. It would be friggin' amazing. Here's something else that's really interesting. Plastic recycling. Why are 99.75% of coffee cups not recycled? Okay? It's gradually becoming common knowledge that it's not easy to recycle your takeaway coffee cup as many people have thought. It's a mixture of paper and plastic and the inner lining designed to make them both heat and leak proof that causes difficulty. There are currently only a small number of specialist plants in the UK or in the world able to process the disposable use cups, and as a result, the vast majority of them, more than 99.75%, don't get recycled. In 2011, it was estimated that 2.5 billion coffee cups were thrown away each year, and that figure is likely to be higher now. In 2011, estimated 2.5 billion coffee cups were thrown away. Some of the biggest sellers of coffee in the UK, including Costa and Starbucks, say they have started recycling coffee cups, but that's only if customers dispose of their takeaway cups in the store. ACE UK, the representative body for beverage carbon manufacturers, has 415 recycling points for coffee cups and other paper products. Cups disposed will be taken to the company's own specialist recycling plant. They generally take places like car parks rather than on streets, which I think the best idea for that is to completely get rid of paper cups and have people buy the reusable cups and just bring that in to get their coffee all the time. And I think that would right there eliminate the problem of coffee cups. Cups that are left on the curb in a household recycling or in a bin on a high street railway station, however, will generally end up in a landfill. So if we're not giving paper cups out, we won't have to worry about that. Industry body, the Paint Cup Alliance, says the specialist plants that do have technology already have the capacity to recycle all the cups that we throw away. It's the infrastructure to transport them that's where they're currently lacking. And if they don't want to get rid of paper cups altogether, they should start putting out garbage disposal cans that are specifically just for coffee cups, so people could get rid of them, and then they can be picked up, like specifically just that. The growing number of retailers and offices buying composable cups, and one of the biggest providers, which makes its products without plastic, so they are biodegradable. It says compostable cups office, canteens, school, hospitals, and independent coffee shops, and its sales have increased by more than a third in the last 2 years. However, compostable cups have been disposed in food waste bins rather than normal recycle bins, and this is an issue for both homeowners and managers of cafes or workplace canteens. Compostable sounds better, but it can actually make things worse if they are put in the wrong bin, so I just suggest we just take away these damn coffee cups, period. Because they are designed to break down, if they end up in plastic recycling, they can contaminate it. The same is true if you put an ordinary takeaway coffee cup in a recycling. This costs council money in sorting it and even lead to a whole batch of recycled items being rejected. Its products work best in an environment where the waste can be controlled, like a festival. Those kinds of environments, people are likely to buy a drink on site and throw it away on site. The amount of waste that gets rejected for recycling by council has been rising. The waste then ends up in landfills or being burned. The proportion of recycling that gets rejected is still relatively small, though, less than 5%. If compostable cups end up in landfills, unlike plastic, they will break down, but this misses the opportunity to harness the energy produced through the composting for another use, as a fertilizer or even to generate energy. Reusable cups, the 3 biggest coffee retailers, incentives for customers to bring their own usable mugs, that's what I just said, yeah. Rather than disposing a cup makes 100% more sense. And I think that they should just make that mandatory. Get rid of the cups and people aren't going to have a choice but to bring their own cups, right? So, Starbucks has offered a discount for customers using their own mugs since it opened in 1998 and says about 1.8% of all hot drinks are sold in reusable cups. Now, most gas stations give you super discounts if you bring your own cups to get your refills for coffee. It's like 50, 60 cents, to get your coffee if you bring in reusable cups. So it definitely is worth doing, guys. Okay, let's see if it's this one. The trial has been in operation for 6 weeks so far. It's too soon to judge its success, but early indications that it has increased sales of drinks in reusable cups compared to a discount alone. The company does not have data on reusable cup use before the incentive scheme was introduced, so it's difficult to say whether the discount itself is encouraging some people or not, which I think it definitely is, because if you're going to get a discount and you drink that much coffee, yeah. I would say that's making a ground of, that would be a wonderful change to get people to only use, they get rid of the paper cups, you'll get rid of the problem. People won't have a choice, they'll have to bring their own cups, and that will be it. And I think a personalized coffee cup is a lot nicer than, you know what I'm saying, than a normal ass cup. So, I'm going to end the video here. I hope you guys found that educational. Leave your questions and comments below. Let me know what you think about the whole coffee issue and the whole global warming issue. And leave your thoughts below on what you think that individually we can do to help the global warming issue on an everyday scale. Till next time. Okay, guys, I just found this article on climate. Scientists urge